is your host, Joe Delara, and this episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at Props.Cash. You could sign up for your first month with 25% off with code Delara25. Look, they are the best in the business. They are the premier player prop betting tool. It's something that I use every single day in my betting process. I've got it up on the window right next to me while we record this podcast. It's something that is absolutely instrumental to not only my process, but it should be to your process too, because I think that we can each become better bettors. And that's part of what this podcast is about. It's not just me giving out my picks. It's talking about how I come to these conclusions, and that way you guys can become, better. You guys can listen, you can learn, and then you guys can even help me out and send me some tips. My DMs are always open, and I'm always willing to engage with you guys. So, Props.Cash has the hit rate charts. They have the matchup charts, so you can see just how good of a matchup it is. You can see prior performance data for that player. You can see it for other players at the same position. There are just so many little tools that you can use and different filters that you can do. So if you want to see how a guy performs in 20 to 30 minutes, it's in Props.Cash, and you can get that for your first month for 25% off with code Delara25. Now, producer Corey, how are we doing today? It's a big week. I know we got the Super Bowl coming up.
Yep.
We're not going to really talk about it too much, but who are you rooting for?
I don't know.
Maybe are you
am I going to be a dumbass and actually bet against the Chiefs? Like, that's silly of me.
Dude, I keep going through this in my brain. I have a future on the Niners, and I don't have one on the Chiefs, so I'm just not going to bet this. I'm just going to root for the Niners.
Yeah, just sit this one out.
I'm sitting it out. But there are like a lot of boosts available. There are a lot of like promos and stuff available to you guys. Like if you are looking at getting a new sports book or getting a new situation, like just try to see spread your bets out.
The deposit bonuses at this time are prime.
They're pretty nice. So definitely check that out. It's all definitely really important to try to help you with your bankroll management, give you some fun money, give you some extra free bucks to kind of play.
Who doesn't need $200 in credits on any given sports book?
Yeah, like why not?
Fine.
Why not? Why not us? Why not us?
It's free money. Yeah.
It's literally free. So I'm gonna root for the Niners. I think the Niners are a little bit better. I think that the Chiefs, it's been an incredible run. I think it could arguably be one of the greatest runs to a Super Bowl in the past or recent history anyway. Just based on the quarterbacks that they kind of had to go through.
It's tough to bet against Patrick Mahomes. That's what's giving me pause to even touch anything.
Yeah, I did see something that was like, how funny would it be if Brock Purdy is the Eli Manning to Patrick Mahomes is Tom Brady? And I was like, I love this.
Mr. Irrelevant that would be so perfect.
Yeah, granted, Eli Manning, number one draft pick, Mr. Irrelevant, but we get the point.
Everybody considered him irrelevant.
Yeah. Did you see
everybody poo-pooed all of our hopes and dreams?
Did you see Eli's little rap that he did?
Of course I did. I fucking love him. Anything he does is gold.
That was awesome. It beat Brady twice. So
and for what it's worth, if I were him, I would have signed fake game used memorabilia and sold it as well.
Yeah, like why not?
Why the fuck wouldn't you do that?
You got to do.
If you're saying you wouldn't, you're a liar and you're an ass.
Just make it happen. Make it happen.
Yeah.
So a funny thing happened today. Before we kind of get into this, is the fucking DraftKings, like last night I gave out Rudy Gobert, or 2 nights ago I gave him to get hit his rebounds prop, and it was over 12.5. It moved to like 13.5. Not only did the Chicago Bulls, like I think somebody had to have made a call, because DraftKings fucking put out a tweet and they're like, the number one bet prop today is Rudy Gobert over rebounds, like with the fucking, like with the French fry, with the odds, like everything in there. And I was like, fuck, like this is so chalked. So like we'll see how this plays out now, because we're recording this at 8:17 p.m. Eastern time. That game basically just tipped. But the Bulls changed their starting lineup, and they were like, oh, we're gonna start Drummond too. So like they really, like DraftKings made the call, like, well, we're gonna blame them. Like if this doesn't hit. If it does hit, then like give me all the credit. But if not, then definitely blame DraftKings for sure. So talking about chalk plays, this is what it is. But look, we're getting really close to the NBA trade deadline. That deadline is on Thursday, and what it kind of does, it kind of creates like a really interesting and a really difficult time to talk about props, to bet player props, to even bet on games. And this podcast, we're going to give out we'll still give out some picks, but there's going to be some caveats. It's going to be a little bit lighter, I think. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the trade rumors that are, potentially swirling around the internet here. The biggest thing though, when it comes to these rumors, is you kind of have an idea of most of the teams and most of the players that this is like impacting, right? Like, that the Lakers like consistently continue to be in conversations about players. You see that the Utah Jazz continue to be in conversations about players. You see that the New York Knicks are involved in trades. Like, there's a number of teams that you see and you're like, all right, like these guys are all, kind of in on trades, like they're kind of in on different scenarios, and you can kind of see like maybe like some of the guys or some of the positions that may be, I want to say, lacking as we near the deadline, and just whether they're going to get traded or whether they don't want somebody to get hurt, for example, and those are all important things. So like with the Orlando Magic, for example, they've kind of kicked around like whether or not they want to go after maybe like a Chris Paul or Kyle Lowry, and how that may or may not look. When you consider some of these moves, like obviously if Lowry or Chris Paul comes in, it's obviously going to impact what Orlando's doing in their backcourt with their guard positioning play and like with their guard play. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out on moving forward. But one of the players and the teams that I'm most interested in right now is when you look at like the Golden State Warriors, for example. One of the players that's been talked about being moved is Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins, he got upgraded. He's probable for this game, for this next game against the 76ers on Wednesday. He's listed as probable. But there are a number of other players on the injury report as well. Like Draymond Green is listed as questionable for this game against the 76ers. We've got the spread at about a pick 'em right now. Obviously, there's no Joel Embiid. We'll talk about that in a minute. One of the things, like when I'm looking at this though, is I'm looking at, you don't always want to bet like on a trade happening, right? But it is nice, like if you bet on a prop, you like the play, and then there's always like a little bit of upside if somebody were to get traded. So like in this instance, we've been really running back Kuminga, either points or points and rebounds, like a lot. He's now hit it in 9 of his last 10 games on this points and rebounds line, or the points line. This is set at 25.5 points plus rebounds. It is a little bit of a different scenario. Last game, obviously, Andrew Wiggins didn't play. Dario Saric returned. Moses Moody returned. And I thought it was a great matchup for him against the Brooklyn Nets. Here, you get a matchup against the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know if I like it matchup-wise, like as much. But you do have a little bit of upside here in the fact that Draymond's on the report. Maybe he doesn't play. And Andrew Wiggins, even though he got upgraded, he's been like one of the number one guys in trade talks right now. The Warriors know that they kind of need to move him if they want to improve, or if they like, that's like their piece. He's basically their piece that they can use to move to kind of create and facilitate a new deal. So that's all like super, super important, right? When you consider this play, then it's just like an additional piece of upside that you could maybe get somebody moved that opens up more minutes or more usage for a player like Kuminga. So that's part of why I kind of like this prop as well. And another spot that's similar to that is I was looking at the Cleveland Cavaliers game, and I was looking at Jared Allen's player props. So the Cavs are playing the Wizards in this matchup, and Jared Allen's rebounding line is set at 11.5. Part of why I like the spot here is that it's a matchup against Daniel Gafford. Marvin Bagley is already out. Daniel Gafford has been in numerous trade talks. There's obviously the potential that he could get traded before this game even starts, which would really, really make the Pistons front, or the Wizards front court, extremely thin, rather. But even if he doesn't, Allen's had incredible history against Daniel Gafford. He's got 12, 19, 8, 14, 14, 13, 10, and 14 rebounds against Daniel Gafford over the last couple of seasons. Some of that's with Evan Mobley, some of it's without Evan Mobley. I do think that obviously Mobley's impact and Mobley's presence kind of impacts Allen's rebounding a bit. We'll see how much of an uptick we get for Evan Mobley in the minutes department here. as you know, as he's kind of ramped up in his return to injury. But it's definitely a spot that you could say like, all right, there's a little bit more of additional upside here. If Gafford is to be ruled out or is to get traded, that could really change this prop, and it's something that you kind of want to get into now, in my opinion, given the fact that the Wizards would be super super thin at the center position here. Another spot that I'm looking at, and I think a game that is particularly interesting, is if we look at the New Orleans Pelicans against the Los Angeles Clippers. So these teams, this is a really interesting game. The Clippers are fourth in adjusted net rating. They're plus 5.6. They're number 2 in adjusted offense, number 13 in adjusted defense. The Pelicans are eighth in adjusted net rating, 13th in adjusted offense, and ninth in adjusted defense. So part of my look here with this game anyway is Zion, it just popped on the report as questionable. So that would obviously impact what New Orleans can do offensively. It changes their offense. It changes the way that they play. It changes their tempo. It really changes their entire, mindset on how exactly they're going to play. When we look at this matchup for the Clippers, Zubac, he didn't play on Monday night due to the calf injury that he's kind of come back from. He's kind of ramping up. This is a matchup, though, where New Orleans, I think, would prefer obviously to be healthy, but it does put two teams that are stylistically interesting, I think, against each other. The Clippers obviously have elite wing players. Like the whole team is just a bunch of wings. They can do a little bit of everything. And when you look, and I think that having James Harden and his ability to facilitate in this matchup is going to be really important against what has been a pretty strong New Orleans Pelicans defense. On the flip side, I think that what the Clippers can do defensively is they can kind of disrupt. You have a lot of size, you have a lot of wings, you have guys like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, that can kind of get into and bother guys like Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum. So I think if Zion's not there, that's the one kind of positional matchup that New Orleans, I think, would really have a significant advantage in. So without him, I think it obviously impacts the cap. Right now, the Pelicans are 6.5-point road underdogs. I think that if Zion plays, I want to take the Pelicans. I still might want to take the Pelicans anyway if this line really inflates, if he's ruled out, just based on the fact that I think the team has been so good and they're so well coached and they're so well. I do feel like they're like a touch underrated, as good as the Clippers have been. That's probably the way that I would lean, especially a lot of times when guys get ruled out. It is a spot for teams to kind of rally together and kind of make a push in order to stay afloat and continue to put forward a good game. So that's definitely a spot that I'm looking at. Another game that I think is particularly interesting on this slate is we have the San Antonio Spurs against the Miami Heat. Miami's on a back-to-back. So this is a good spot for the Spurs. The Spurs are 8-point road underdogs at the time of this recording. The one thing to note, though, is that it is the front end of a back-to-back for the Spurs. So we have to keep tabs on whether or not Wemby's going to play. That's always a bit of a risk. But one of the things that I would look to do here, I might look at some Trey Jones assists. I think that it's a good spot. Miami plays a lot of zone. I think it's an opportunity for him to dish, kind of find some of those catch and shoot type of guys. I think it might be a really good matchup for Devin Vassell as well. So I'd be looking for that. And I think that honestly, as if Victor does play, I'm probably going to grab the Spurs at +8. It wouldn't surprise me to see a number of guys in Miami sit, whether it's Jimmy Butler, maybe Tyler Hero. He's been dealing with some stuff. So a couple of those guys, there is definitely some potential for somebody to sit. So that's definitely a spot that I'm looking at. Another interesting matchup, right, is I'm kind of going through the whole slate here, but the Raptors and the Hornets. The Raptors, it looks like they're probably done dealing. Maybe they move Gary Trent Jr. That's definitely an option for them, I think. But the Hornets seem to be in active negotiations as well in terms of moving Bridges. So they're a team that looks like they're trying to rebuild. They're trying to retool. Brandon Miller has looked amazing. And I think that given that, I like a Brandon Miller look in this game. I could see Brandon Miller continuing to have a good game. He's been able to get into a better flow as he's kind of had the ball in his hands more. He's seen his usage rise. We've seen his prop around like 22.5. I think it's a particularly good matchup for him in this game against the Raptors as a guy who can score. He can create for himself. He can score off the dribble. And if the Hornets do see Bridges maybe get moved, or he's limited in this game because they want to, or because they want to make sure that he remains healthy in order to move him, then it's a spot for Brandon Miller that he could really shine. I did want to talk a little bit more about the Joel Embiid injury and how I think it's going to impact how I think it might really just like impact the team overall. So with this injury, Philly has to make a couple of decisions. One of the biggest decisions for Philly to make is, Adrian Wojnarowski said that today they're like, oh, we're going to reevaluate him in a couple weeks. And it's really like the guy got surgery. I know that it sounds like, maybe it's a trim or something like that. The dude's been dealing with injuries to the meniscus in his left knee for a number of years now. And we'll just have to see like whether he can, not only whether he can come back, but whether or not he's going to come back and be effective. And I think that that's really the most important thing, because Daryl Morey has famously said, if you have a 5% chance to win the NBA title, like you should be going all out for that. So I think that the way that they kind of handle the trade deadline is going to be particularly interesting, because there is the opportunity to try to say like, all right, well, Maxey, just lead us to the promised land. Like you can do it. But my concern with that is that actually Maxey's numbers have not really been significantly better without Embiid. He sees a scoring jump by about 1.5 points. His rebounds drop, his assists drop. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's the primary option for opposing defenses, and you're getting fewer possessions in transition due to Embiid's defense not being on the floor. And you just obviously don't have one of the best scoring players, or best players really, in the NBA active. With that in mind, though, it does create an interesting question for Philly. Like, do you want to try to move off of some of these guys that you have? Like, do you want to try to move Tobias Harris to somebody that, you think might be a better contender where you can get something back for him? Do you want to move Kelly Oubre, who's on like an incredible contract? Do you want to move a guy like DeAnthony Melton? Like, those are just a couple of the questions I think that you kind of have to answer if you're Philly. And I think that based on whether or not they make moves at the deadline, like kind of around that, then I think that's going to tell us a lot about what Philadelphia thinks of Embiid's knee injury, regardless of the fact that they're going to be reassessing it in about a month. Now, the other thing here with Philly is where they are in the standings. So right now, it's the wrong thing. All right. Right now in the standings, Philly is in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. They're 30-19. They're behind the Celtics, the Cavs, the Bucks, the Knicks. They're 3 games ahead of the Indiana Pacers, 4 games ahead in the loss column, and also 4 games ahead of the loss column of the Orlando Magic. I think it's highly unlikely that they would fall out of the play-in tournament. I really don't think that would happen. But I do think that there is some potential for them to fall a bit lower, whether that's the 6 seed, the 7 seed, maybe even the 8 seed. If Joel Embiid does come back, you got to ramp him up. The best case scenario on this time frame is they're basically saying is like 2 months. 2 months is literally the playoffs. Like, it's very difficult to ramp up in the NBA playoffs. It's very difficult to ramp up generally. The playoffs are difficult as on their own. This is going to create a very difficult situation, I think, for them. It also, though, creates an interesting scenario in the bracket because Philly is not a team that you would expect to be at the bottom half of the bracket. And it could really create, like, if Embiid is healthy, it could really create an interesting first round matchup where, you have some juggernauts facing each other early. Whether it's like Philly playing the Knicks, Philly playing Milwaukee, Philly playing the Celtics. Those are like not necessarily matchups that you really envisioned in the first round of the NBA playoffs. So it kind of can create a little bit of a war. It's going to create some jockeying for position later on in the season. I don't. I think like the 8 seed is probably a little bit far for them to fall. It obviously is possible though, considering the fact that Indiana's at 23 losses, Orlando's at 23 losses, Miami is at 24 losses, and those are all teams that are really just pretty close to Philadelphia at this stage of the game in the standings. Um, Even if they do play in a 1-game playoff, I don't know how much I'd like their prospects against a team like Orlando, especially a team like Miami. I think they would obviously be fine against a Chicago or an Atlanta. But even then, if they really do fall off, you could be really looking at like a very disappointing season for Philly. And one of the things that's, I think, like one of those unintended consequences of this is that Paul Reed's contract was only guaranteed, or is only guaranteed, that the Danny Ainge poison pill only guaranteed if they make it to the second round of the playoffs. So they like Paul Reed might find himself without a contract right now if Philadelphia cannot advance. Um, so those are a couple of things that I was looking at for this NBA slate. It's definitely a little bit on the thinner side for me right now. It's very difficult to bet at this point without having some of the information. I am like looking at, in the Pistons and the Kings, I'm looking at a Domantas Sabonis play. I kind of like the matchup against Jalen Duren, but I think the line's a little high. It's like, we're looking at a 12-point spread and we're looking at a 13.5 rebounds line. So as good as Sabonis is, I don't know if I really want action in that spot. So it's definitely a little bit of a concerning look there for me, but it's definitely something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. Maybe I'll take like a first quarter play, but we'll make sure to put it out there for you. So one of the things that I did want to talk about that's not specifically betting related in terms of like this slate, but I wanted to talk about a little bit of bankroll management stuff, right? So somebody today was in my mentions, and they were like, well, how do you bet this? Like, how do you do this when, like I'm trying to tail everything and I have like a lot out there? The way that I look at my bankroll, and when I put out plays, like I pretty much am always putting out plays for 1 unit. Like I think I that's the way that I bet for the public anyway. Like that's how I'm putting it out there. That's how I'm logging it. And that's honestly how I bet personally for the most part. Is I flat bet. It's like a 1 unit play. And I think that that's the best way to kind of do the math, right? I like to bet flat units. I think it's better than betting to win 1 unit. And the reason that I think that is that it has to do with like what I'm staking, right? So if I'm betting, let's say I'm betting $10, right? If I'm betting $10 flat bet every time, you know what your expectation is. You know how many units you have. Like it's a little bit easier, I think, math wise, right? When you're betting to win, you have to bet the juice. So let's say I'm betting on something that's minus 110. And I flat bet $10, I win $9 and 19 cents or whatever. If I'm betting to win, I have to bet $11 to win 10. It doesn't really make a huge difference there. Where it can make a big difference though is like if I'm betting on something at like minus 150. So instead of betting $10, I'm betting then 15. So I have a higher percentage of my bankroll out there. The way I like to look at units, I like to look at each unit as 1% of my bankroll. So that way, like whether I win or I lose, it's not really like the end of the world. You need to be able to go through like ebbs and flows. We get hot, we run hot. There's certain times where I think it's appropriate to withdraw. I do think though that overall I like to keep my bankroll, at least for the season, or at least for portions of the season, intact. Like unless I hit a lotto or something like that, something that I bet like for fun, where it like kind of dramatically changed what my total bankroll was, right? So the reason I do this and the reason I say this though is that number one, like from a mental health perspective, and I think from like a betting perspective, you really just don't need to have that much action. Like I get it. Like when people want to feel a rush, like that's like, it's fun, it's exciting, like whatever. The way that I look at this, it's a lot more analytical, it's a lot more numbers based. And I know that over the course of the season, year over year, I'm consistently winning. And I think that the best way for me to do that is by being able to bet the edges that I see that are available. So on one slate, that might be 2 plays, another slate, it might be 10 plays. But if my bankroll isn't able to handle that, then that obviously will create a problem. I'm not going to be able to manage it. It's stressful, I would imagine, if you're betting that much, and it's not really conducive to like how, like you can live your life however you want, but like I'm just saying, like I don't think that it's productive for you, like moving forward. Like the way that I view this, and like I know that there are professional people that do this for a living. I don't. I put this content out for you guys for free. I do get paid by different, by the Action Network, by like I have some of my affiliate deals with like Props.Cash, stuff like that. But I'm not getting paid by like sports books. I'm not getting paid by a Discord. I'm not getting paid by any of that stuff. So I'm putting out my stuff for you for free. It's just something that I like to do, and I have found success in it for the last couple of years, or really ever since I've kind of been doing it. So when I say this about like the bankroll management, it's really just about being able to bet on the edges that you want, but then also not being like super stressed about it. Like you shouldn't be sweating, like we say, like we're sweating a bet, but like I'm not worried about it. Like if you put it out there one way or the other, you should be able to live with that. Like as long as your process was good. And that's why, when I talk through some of these plays with you guys here, when you read my write-ups, you can see what my process is. And I'm like, okay, this is the way that I capped it. This is what I saw. This is what I was expecting. Did it happen the way that I thought? Okay, yeah, great. If it didn't, then it's either like, well, did it cash still, or like was I wrong, or like was I right for the wrong reasons, or was I wrong but still, like did the bet lose, but was my analysis right? Like was he getting that type of shot, like was it, and the shot just wasn't falling. So those are, I think, some of the important questions. And when you aren't like living and dying by every play, in terms of like what your bankroll health is like overall, then you can kind of appreciate and understand a little bit more the nuances of that, as opposed to if you don't do that and you're like, I need this, like I have to pay my rent, or like I need to buy groceries or something like that, then you're not thinking about it in that way. You're just looking at the results. And obviously results oriented thinking, I think, is important. I think it's important to be able to say like, we win more than we lose. But at the same time, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean wins and losses. I don't necessarily mean like plus units, minus units. I generally mean what like is the ROI on the situation? What is the return on investment? Because I think that that's one of the most important things. So like if you bet $10,000 on a play that's plus 100, it's the same ROI as if you bet $1 on a play that's plus 100. That's ROI. And I think that that's sometimes a difficult concept for people to understand. But when I put out plays and you see that they're being tracked by a unit system, then it's easier for you guys to understand like just how profitable I've been, how profitable you could be, tailing some of these plays. And it's a little bit more, and it's definitely more scalable. So you can say like, all right, like he's made 1,000 bets, and over that time period, he's got like, plus 9% ROI. So you can take that and say like, all right, if I had my unit system and I did this, then this is what I would be up as well. As opposed to, when people just put out win-loss records, or they just say like, I'm up X amount of units, that doesn't really matter to me, because like if somebody's betting 30 units on every play, like I think that unit management is like really questionable a lot of times. When we look at it out there, you see people betting anywhere between like 1 unit, 5 units, 10 units, 30 units. Like it's irresponsible. I think it's disingenuous. I think that you're just putting numbers out there, and I think it's impossible to be transparent. Because like you could say like, oh, like we're up 50 units this month, but if you're betting 50 units on every play, then you're up one play. You won one extra play. So that's why I think ROI is so important. And if people can't really express that, or they can't really say that, or they can't demonstrate that, then I think that that's something you need to consider when like you're tailing people, or, you know, like what the situation is. So like, for example, just, you know, I'm going to tout myself right now, honestly. Like looking at my stuff, right? When you look at my bet history over the last 7 days, at the time that we're recording this, 28, 15, and 3 plus 58.65% ROI. This is all trackable through the Action Network app. I'm a verified expert bettor there, so I can't edit my bets. There's nothing that I can do. Once it's in, there's no way for me to change it. It's on the back end through software. If there's an error for some reason in something that's logged, like if I wrote, like if it's like the wrong like juice, like if it's something that's like minus 1,000 or something like that when it should be like minus 100, then, you know, that's something that we can get changed on back end. But I have to actively ask somebody to do that. It's not something that I can just do on my own. Over the last 30 days, we're 124, 117, and 10 plus 32.81 units, ROI 17.83%, and all time plus 170.26 units. I've got 2,831 wins, 3,325 losses, 95 pushes for a 6.82% ROI. So you can see like how there's ebbs and flows, how you can run hot, how you can run cold. But ultimately, the thing that doesn't really matter, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of other people's opinions, it's not so much the wins and the losses. It's not necessarily the units. It's the ROI. So, you know, if you consistently pull back an ROI that's positive, then that's something that's important. So like even when you're looking at your own structure and your own unit system and the way that you're betting and the way that you look at your, you know, your results, look at it through a couple different lenses, and understand how you kind of get there on each of them. So like it's important, obviously, to be plus units. That means that you're winning. It means that you're not bleeding a hole in your pocket, right? But at the same time, you want to make sure that your ROI is good. You want to make sure that, you know, you're betting in a way that's sustainable. So that's between, you know, unit management, bankroll management. And the way that I look at it, I don't really believe I'm playing anything more than like 3 units on anything. And I think, like I said, I think that units should be about 1% of your bankroll. So those are some of my bankroll management tips, especially for this point in the NBA season. We're kind of in the doldrums. The All-Star break is coming up. The trade deadline's coming up. You have a lot of guys like that are just excited to get, like, especially a lot of vets. They're excited to get a couple days off, like a week off now, go to the All-Star game, maybe spend some extra time with family if they're not going to the All-Star game. Things get really funky right around now, and then they really tighten up for a little bit after the All-Star break. Then you get another lull again as teams kind of rest and jockey for position as we head into the NBA playoffs. So that's my lesson on bankroll management for this podcast. With that, producer Corey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. How about yourself?
Hanging in there, man. Hanging in there.
Good to hear.
It's not been bad. Been putting a lot of miles in the car, but you know, it is what it is. Gas prices actually haven't been too bad lately.
Yeah, no, they're right where they were when I graduated high school.
Yeah, so it just is what it is. It's
Can't beat that.
cyclical. What do you got going on for us? What are we recommending today?
Banana bread.
Oh, I just had banana bread today.
Yeah, I'm out, which really makes me sad because I want some right now.
Did you make
so that's
it?
what I'm craving. That's what I'm
it?
recommending.
How'd you get
I
it?
did. Well, I didn't. My fiance did.
Nice.
That was pretty much it. She made
Jenna,
it, and I need more.
you ate it.
Yeah,
Jenna,
I need more now.
Jenna has been making it instead of the loaf. She's been making them in cupcakes.
Oh, hell yeah.
And the thought process is, number one, it's easier. You can grab and go.
True.
I've been taking them for like a snack. Like I took one for breakfast.
Have to cover over multiple days of use.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
you're just saying a prayer. You didn't like leave it cracked under the aluminum foil.
Yeah,
Get all stale and shit.
It's not bad. It's really not bad.
Smart. They
Uh,
actually, I believe it's called the muffin. Um, if you want to get into semantics, but yeah, no, it's definitely an easier to go route.
for sure, for sure. So definitely, so I'd recommend the muffin variety of that. Um, Additionally, speaking of like fiancés, significant others, wives, whatever, um, if you haven't made a Valentine's Day reservation, you like number one need to do that. Especially if you want to go out on Valentine's Day, like you needed to do this like last week. So like definitely do it now. Um, I did,
Or you can start getting an elaborate meal together that you can make if
yes,
you're really screwed.
or that. Like if you're down a lot of units,
Yeah,
do
you
that.
have time now to like do the food shopping and make it look like it wasn't a last minute option.
Exactly. What
So
I did,
get activated.
other thing is too, like girls, they want to be asked to be your Valentine. It's like you would think that it's just a given, but they still want to be asked. So like today I sent an edible arrangements to my own house asking my wife to be my Valentine. Not bad. So like it's just like a way kind of I think Valentine's Day is like literally one of the dumbest holidays. It's just a Hallmark holiday. Um,
Truly.
but at the same time, it's like it is an opportunity for you to do a little bit of something to make people a little happier.
Can at
So
least get
that
a nice dinner out of it.
yeah, get a nice dinner out of it. Get something that you want to have. Maybe have like a nice bourbon or nice red wine, like a full bodied cab, and call it a day. So my recommendations are a little bit Valentine's Day related. Make your reservations. Ask your significant other to be your Valentine, because right now it's still like a week ahead. So you do have a little bit of headway going into that, where it's not like, well, you're asking me like 2 days before. This is ridiculous. Like right now it's like you got a week, you have some time, maybe get a little bit of chocolate or something. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. So do recommend those things. The other thing that I'm going to recommend is I've been on a real like I've been on a real rice kick. Like I've been really wanting rice. So I've been having rice with like a lot of my meals lately, which I guess kind of checks out, Um,
I don't know what to say here.
for the listeners, I just pointed to my eyes.
Am I wrong for assuming that was the case?
Well,
Just
sometimes
knowing
like
you.
sometimes you go without rice for a bit and it's like,
I mean, I've had my dry spells as well, but like it's a staple.
yeah, like we had like a big potato week last week. So that's why I was like, I kind of could use some rice. Did have
Spuds are heavy in the wintertime.
Spuds are good in the wintertime. Did have, speaking of not heavy though, did have some cod last night. Uh, Very good.
Personal
Pan
fave of
fried.
mine.
It was really good. Was a really big fan of it. And it was just nice, like pretty light. Because sometimes you need that light meal mixed in every so often between the stews and the potatoes, etc. So really did enjoy a little bit of cod. Um, that's really all I've got for you guys right now. But with that, obviously it's not necessarily COD season. The NBA, but the NBA is in a fishy time of the year. One of the best
I
ways you
knew it
can
was going to happen at some point.
one of the best ways that you can avoid some of the fishiness of the NBA season is you guys can get Props.Cash for 25% off your first month with code Delera25. Look, you guys can actually dive into the data. You can mess around with the minutes. You can mess around with the numbers. You can mess around with like the shot attempts, the free throw attempts, the shots made, the turnovers, like whatever. You can look at all of those things to determine what you think is or is not a good bet. And those are all critically important to finding success in betting not only the NBA, they have the NCAA in there. So if you're a college hoops guy, they've got NCAA. They've got WNBA when that happens. They've got MLB, NFL, all of the major sports they've got on Props.Cash, and you can get that for 25% off your first month with code Delera25. So with that, let's continue to keep things from being fishy, and let's cash that.